He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 29 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Henry, we're continuing our emerging talent series today with a guest who is a current student at the Hubbard School in Minneapolis. Her name is Alex Chrislu. Let's join the conversation. Henry, we're delighted to have another student from the Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communications, or is it Mass Communications and Journalism? I always get it.
I
I always
think
get the Hubbard School. We'll just call it the Hubbard School.
Yeah, that works.
It is one of the better programs in the country for young people who aspire to to make advertising their career. And Mark Jensen spoke so highly of you. We haven't had someone from the Hubbard School in a little while. So we're delighted to have you. Alex Chrislu, welcome to the Brief Brothers.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. It's such a pleasure.
Well, we are delighted to have you. What we usually do is ask you to tell us a little bit about you. What was it that attracted you to advertising? And then give us a little sense of the trajectory, what it was like getting into the program, what it was like studying, and internships, things like that, where you are up to where you are now.
Yes, this is one of my favorite questions. I love talking about it because I initially went in just basic communications major. That was kind of like what I was planning on declaring. That was the route I was going to go down. And then I had like my summer academic advising appointment where every like incoming freshman has to meet the academic advisor. They start setting up with classes, set up times, set up a nice schedule for you, and just kind of get you into the mode of what college is going to be, what you can look forward to come September. I think it was in June. I met with my absolutely phenomenal academic advisor. I've gotten very lucky. And he was like, hey, you were thinking about just doing plain communications. He's like, you're really good at talking. Have you ever thought about maybe trying the strategic communications major? It's a little bit more narrow. It's a little bit more focused than maybe what just the regular communications major is. And I was like, tell me more. And he was like, it's strategic communications, it's advertising, public relations. It's in the Hubbard School of Journalism. And essentially, you're just going to get a really well-rounded view of kind of what communications is, but it's going to be a little bit more focused. And I was like, that sounds great. So I ended up going into school with kind of just that idea in mind of, okay, I guess advertising is what I'm probably going to end up declaring. I knew for sure I wanted to apply to the Hubbard School. That was a no-brainer. But we have many majors in the Hubbard School, right? So I could have gone the mass communications route, could have gone the Stratcom route. I could have chosen more of the PR route. But I kind of chose advertising because Mark Jensen came into my journalism 1001 class. He was a guest speaker that day. I think it was fate. And he came in literally like my second day, journalism 1001, freshman, brand new, absolutely terrified, had no idea how college works. And he was like, obviously, Mark Jensen is a fantastic advertiser. So he has all the pictures. And he's like, hey guys, NSAC is one of the best programs that you could possibly join. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. He said, this is for Stratcom majors. If you're interested in advertising, if you're even interested in public relations, mass communications, whatever it is, everyone is welcome. At that time, it was a club. I was a freshman at the time. So that was what, like 3 years ago? I'm graduating now, 4 years ago almost. So I was like, cool. He had flyers. He was like, we have an informational meeting Tuesday night. This was like a Monday. So the next day, and I took a flyer, and because I didn't know what advertising was, I figured the best way to get my foot in the door was to join as many clubs as I possibly could.
Let me just stop you right there, Alex.
Yeah.
NSAC is National Student Advertising
Competition team. That's
Competition.
exactly.
Let's just clarify
Yes,
that.
I should have specified. Yep, that's exactly. So it's a national competition team. Schools across the country can be involved. You get an actual client, real world client that you get to work on,
And a brief.
essentially, and a brief. You get a real brief from the real
A
client.
good brief? A good
A good
brief?
brief. It's a fantastic, yes, very good brief. Really like solid.
Henry must have written it then.
Seriously, Henry, I think you have the inside scoop. Yeah, so I think my first year was MetaQuest, the VR headset, at the time. So I joined the informational meeting. And I was one of the first people to raise my hands. I was 18 years old. I was in a room full of like all probably upperclassmen, had no idea what I was doing. And I asked a lot of questions. And I think that definitely set me apart from the rest. And so my name was kind of just there. And I stuck with it the entire semester. At the time, again, like I said, it was a club. So we started in September and we basically went until the competition. We had districts in like late April, early May, for the MediQuest campaign. I also raised my hand to do the presentation team and be a part of that. I have a performance background. So before coming to school, I was a huge theater nerd. I'm a singer. I play two instruments. I love to be on stage. So
But
my
we
biggest
definitely
thing,
notice that you need to, express yourself more,
oh,
Alex. You
yes,
need to
I
come out of
know.
the shell that
I
Shy,
you
very
know.
shy.
I'm very theatrical. I'm very theatrical. It's just who I am.
all of these things are going to play, if they haven't already, so powerfully in your
I
career.
appreciate that.
This is fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
I
so
came to,
in other words, you didn't have you didn't get hung up on watching commercials or looking at ads when you were flipping through magazines when you were younger. You kind of discovered it when you got to college.
yes, I always loved ads. I always thought,
Okay.
Super Bowl ad, like every year, obviously, my family watches it for the ads. I am not a football human, but I will watch it for the ads. I've always loved, like the Dove beauty campaigns. I've always been a young, like female empowerment, just activist in that way for women. And I think like the Dove beauty campaign was one of the first campaigns to me that spoke to me as a young woman. And I just never thought about advertising though. It was never something that was top of mind for me, right? Like I see something on a screen, I'm like, that's cool. And then it's out the window. And I'm like, I just, like I know the brand, I know the product, I love the product. I'm a big like advocate for all the products that I love, but I never thought of the advertising that went behind these brands, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Oh,
So
definitely. A
yeah.
lot of us, Henry and I have been talking to a lot of folks over the years, young people, new people like you, as well as
Yeah.
vets, and we marvel at how common the uncommon way that people come
Yes.
into this business, right, Henry?
Yes.
I mean, it's with you're kind of an exception because you got to
Yeah.
college and you kind of
Right.
met Mark,
Right.
and Mark kind of lit a fire.
So early
But
on. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of us do other things. We kind of take the circuitous route before
I
we
know.
find our way.
I know.
And
Every
there's no.
internship that I've had, everyone comes, like everyone that I've met, especially professionals that I met, not necessarily the interns, all different majors, like you have sociology majors in the corner and you've got like some engineers and graphic designers, people of all walks of life, different backgrounds, identities that come together. And I feel like but that's what makes advertising so fantastic to me. You can't have all the same humans with the same exact mind, the same exact ways of thinking, working on the same campaign, right? That's how
This
you make a
is
fantastic
this is
campaign.
this is the island of misfit toys.
Literally, like
We all
it's 1,000%. It's just a giant
did,
hodgepodge of
didn't
humans.
didn't fit in other areas, and this
Yeah,
is where we ended up. The maybe it's the profession of last resort.
yeah, I would agree.
And even more so for creatives. But I think for anyone who loves
Yes.
advertising and brands and thinking and ideas and being strategic, uh, you are going to set yourself apart. Even though you've identified this as something that you landed on fairly quickly, but without we've had guests whose mother and or father were in the industry, or
Yes,
had a relative who was in the industry, who had a
sure.
good friend. I think it was Reed Holmes, who was my former boss at
Oh,
Campbell
wow,
Bethune,
sure. Yeah,
said that he had friends in high school, teachers and friends who say, "You're a
yeah,
good writer. You're a good writer. You should use those skills." And he gravitated to advertising, and there are others like that.
yeah,
So you used the skills you started to acquire at Hubbard, and
yes,
you landed one or two pretty impressive internships. Tell us about
yeah.
those.
So yeah, through NSAC completely changed the trajectory of my entire college career. My freshman year, when we did the MetaQuest campaign, it was the first time in about 10 years we went to nationals. So basically, it introduced me to a whole new world of opportunities from agencies across the country. We went to this national competition, that's how I met the recruiters at GSP. And I kept in contact with them for about
Could
2
be
years
Silverstein
after.
and Partners, just
Yep.
for those who don't know. All of
Yeah,
us
thank
on
you.
the inside know what that means, but
Yeah, yes, thank you so much. That's exactly. And so, just fantastic agencies, even in like in-house corporations, right? Like Amazon was there. It's just some of the biggest names in advertising, the advertising world that you could possibly think of. So, yes, my first internship that I landed was at Dalton Agency in Nashville, Tennessee. Them, I had a little bit of the NSAC experience under my belt, right? So for that internship experience, I actually cold called. I cold emailed. I think their application process, that was their application process. It was like, send us an email with your cover letter and your resume, and we'll message you back. And I literally heard back, I think within a week. And I
wow.
would work
I
for
mean,
them.
we've all heard stories about the rabbit hole that those things go down and you
Yes.
never hear from them again.
No, they were so incredible, so incredibly transparent. That was one of the first times I had sent in a cold email or applied, on Indeed, right? And it goes into like the abyss of nothingness.
Mm.
First time, and they were so great throughout the entire hiring process. They always kept me in the know. They were so incredibly communicative. Like, and I told them that in my interview. I was just like, I feel like I love your agency already just because of how incredibly transparent and authentic you guys have been in the hiring process, which isn't everyone. And so I appreciated that. And so I actually went into that internship. It was a PR and an account management internship. I loved it. I loved the account management side more. PR, I liked it, but I just think it wasn't my niche, and I think I've known that since I've started in like this major. I've always known that I think advertising is more of where I wanted to go. So when I was kind of doing two sides of the work, I went more towards the account management side than anything. So I love that. I love sitting in on client meetings. I'm a very organized person. I'm a note taker, avid note taker. I'm very detail oriented. So when I was told of what the description was of an account person, I was like, yeah, that is me 1,010%. And it just happened to perfectly align with what I was doing.
But you're
So,
still, go ahead, Henry.
so I just want to put a good word in for our PR friends, and I recognize what you're saying, and I too, prefer to be on the advertising side. But I've
Yeah,
worked in some campaigns with some excellent PR professionals,
absolutely.
and it's a very hard field to
Absolutely.
be good at.
It
There
is.
there's a lot of um, there's a lot of bullshit in PR, but the
Yeah,
good ones uh,
1,000%.
are really good, and that's what. And I'm thinking particularly of my late friend Joe Ramirez, who was the best PR guy I ever worked with.
Yeah,
But just wanted to put that word in there. Our communications business has a broad range of options. PR is one
it
of them.
does.
It's not for everyone, but those that excel at it, it can be very lucrative and fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I started my career in a branch of public relations. It was media relations. Right out of
Oh,
college, like
sure.
like you, Alex, I had an internship while I was a senior in college at
Yeah,
the front offices of the Tampa Bay Rowdies in Tampa.
that's
And
awesome.
I was writing articles about the players on the Tampa
That
Bay
is
Rowdies
awesome.
for the
My
program
grandpa's in Tampa
magazine.
Bay. I
Yeah,
love
and
Tampa Bay.
that led to my first job out of college in 1980, starting salary $10,000. Yeah, I don't mind revealing that fact now because it's 40 years ago. And I was
Times were different back then.
living the dream, living large back on,
Of course.
but it wasn't, it wasn't what I really wanted to do, except that I loved the writing. I loved the
Absolutely.
writing part of it. And it gave me a chance to e- expose myself to that. And that's what this
Absolutely.
process is meant for you to try this and try that and decide what you
Yeah.
like and decide what you don't
Yeah.
like.
And yeah, absolutely. Like to that point, Henry, I really appreciate you saying that too, because of course, I mean, and I just realized, I was doing it and so there were two of us. There were only two interns. The intern that I worked with, she was phenomenal. Like she was a PR human. And then I, on the other hand, I was more of that account human, right? So I think that's why we worked so beautifully together, because we both had those different strengths and what that was. And we came in and we were able, I think, to just blow the roof off that place, and do just some phenomenal work because we both had our different strengths that we brought to the table. So yes, shout out to
Well,
all our PR friends.
I think Henry and I would agree when I say that of the, I don't know how many students we've talked to, students and recent graduates. So
Mhm.
we'll call this we call it the emerging talent series. So of all those young people, maybe it's a dozen or more, there are a number of common factors that
Yeah.
I think we've witnessed in these people. And I think one of them that stands out is the fact that they don't take no for an answer.
It's
That
true.
you have to have, and that's just endemic in our industry. If it's a
Yeah,
very competitive industry, no
it is
matter
very
what area
competitive.
you want to go into, and you have to do something to stand out.
Yep.
Creatives do crazy things to get the attentions of the creative directors, but you did the same thing. You know, as I said, we've heard so many stories about emails to nowhere, but
Yeah.
you got a good response and you followed up on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
So,
what have you noticed about your fellow students and what sets them
Mhm.
apart? To get, I mean, you had to do something to get into the program, right? Is it a competitive program?
The Hubbard School program?
Yeah.
I would say, that's a great question. I don't fully know. I think it is a moderately competitive program, but they tend to accept, um, I think they tend to accept people that are incredibly qualified, right? Like if you are a student and you show kind of what your experience is, you have a great essay, you have a great GPA, I think Hubbard is incredibly, incredibly flexible with what that is. And they always will make the space for those students to be a part of this program because it's so fantastic. And I don't think they'd ever want someone to not be a part of it, right? And so I think they're incredibly flexible and adaptable to every student.
I think it becomes sort of self-selective. You know you want to be in the
Yeah.
field and you know it's competitive, so you're going to
Yep.
have to
1000%.
you either step up or you're not going to cut it. And
Thousand
I
percent.
think I know how hard I struggled when I was first starting out to figure out what is this thing called a concept. I need to come
Yeah.
up with an idea to
I
sell the
know.
brand. And when I finally figured out how to do it, I was like, oh, it was like a light bulb going on.
Yeah.
And if that light bulb doesn't go on, you're not going to be able to, you're going to be left behind.
1000%.
So either you learn this skill, and it is a skill
Yeah.
you can learn. I believe it's a skill you can learn and you can hone it. Um, so what are you, what's, you're coming up to graduate in May. What's the
Mhm.
next step for you? What do you hope to do?
So after my internship at GS&P, Goodby Silverstein and Partners, I was kind of teeter-tottering between brand strategist and account management. And that was because throughout my entire NSAC career, I'm still in NSAC, this is my third year doing it. I really loved strategy. And that was kind of where I started going. That was the path I started taking. And then I had the account management and PR internship at Dalton. Then I had an account management and strategy internship at GS&P. And while I loved strategy, I just kept going back to account. It was the first time at GSP that we, as the interns, got to work on actual client work and internal work and present to the internal teams. I got to work for Mountain Dew. I worked on Sam Adams, BMW, Xfinity. And I noticed within our intern cohort, I tended to be the one who I tended to take a little bit more charge, right? I was kind of putting people into the different spots. I had built campaigns before, so I kind of knew the vibe. I knew what it was. I knew what it took to deliver to these internal teams and what they were asking. I was also really good at question asking. So account, I naturally gravitated towards it. My director of my internship program that year too, she was like, Alex, I think you know who you are. And she's like, she's like, if I looked in a crowd of humans and someone said, hey, point to an account person, they were like, I would point to you in a heartbeat. And I was like, and that I think she gave me my answer. And so now after those experiences, I just realized I think accounts where I'm going, account management, whatever that ends up being. I currently am applying to positions right now, for, full-time positions, internships, whatever it may be, just trying to get my foot in the door. But that's my future aspirations. I don't necessarily have an agency in mind. I of course loved GS&P. I loved Dalton, but I'm keeping my options open and I'm applying to a lot of places right now.
Okay, well, that's the way you have to do it.
Of
Let's
course.
kind of loop the conversation back to, something that's dear to Henry's heart and mind, and that, of course, is the brief. You
Yeah.
obviously had to work from briefs. You were introduced to this thing called a creative brief
Yes.
in the course of your work at Hubbard, and you may still be working with them. And did you have a chance to contribute to the writing of briefs in your internships, or is that not part of what you did?
Um, Honestly, I would say it was more of them giving us a it was more of them giving us the brief and then us delivering kind of the deliverables, the assets, the research that they were asking for. But in my NSEC experiences, that's where I was building my own briefs with
Okay.
my strategy team. So my internships, I can't say no, I don't think from what I remember, was not building a lot of briefs, but I have a lot of brief writing experience from my NSAC for 3 years. NSAC
Okay,
counsel.
let's talk about that. What was that first brief like?
It was very challenging. It was challenging too because the ask, from what I remember, for MetaQuest at least, it was getting Gen Z to just use a VR headset in their everyday lives. How do
Hmm.
you get Gen Z to use it in their everyday lives? Again, I don't know if that was exactly what it was, but that was the ask. And then we were tasked to build our own brief, right, for Gen Zers to then execute a campaign. And that was hard. Again, I was new at it. I kind of had no idea what I was doing freshman year, truly. I was learning as I was going, right? So like they put me on the strategy team. I helped them build that brief through the research. I loved researching. I mean, the reason I love strategy so much is because I love humans. I love understanding humans. I love the psychology behind humans and why we think the way we do and why we're driven by the things that we're driven by. I think it's fascinating. So they put me on that research kind of portion of the strategy section, which helped them write the brief initially. I don't think I was a huge part of writing the brief for MetaQuest. Indeed, though, I was a big part of writing that brief, and that was also very challenging because Indeed is a job searching app, and a lot of our Gen Zer friends aren't the biggest fans of job searching apps. Again, to the point that I had mentioned before about sending your application into the abyss and not hearing back.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
So it was complicated, especially not knowing what parts went into it. I'd say this year as project manager, AT&T is our client this year. Say this year as project manager, I had a big part of writing the brief, and that was a lot easier through my different portfolio classes, even Mark's class, strategic planning, brand planning. Like I've had so much experience now since freshman year to kind of get to where I am
Okay.
now.
Have you ever gone back to look at that first brief and compare it
I
to how you're doing it now?
I have not, but I absolutely will. That is such a fantastic idea. Such a
Yeah,
fantastic idea.
I mean, Henry has dug up old briefs that he's written, and quite frankly, they're pretty good, even though
Yeah,
they're old.
of course.
But I always think that's a great exercise. Creatives can do it the same thing. Original, if they
Yeah,
keep their portfolios. I used to have, well, I have these little notebooks now, but I used to have big
yeah,
ones where I would do scratch notes and do my copywriter's art
sure,
direction, and I was, stick
sure.
figures. That's where I would think.
Yeah.
And I used to have five, six, seven of those things on my shelf, and they just took up space, and I got rid of them. But I wish I had them just so I
Oh,
could go
what a
back and look to see the way I thought
yeah,
back in those days. They're teaching tools.
yeah,
So you said you've done this is your third year with NSAC?
yeah. Third year with UNSAC. Yep.
Okay, so you've written a few briefs.
Yes, I have.
Um, what is your sense, having done some internships? You've met some folks who've been in the business,
Yep.
what, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years, some very senior people.
Yeah.
What impresses me about you is a very positive, outgoing attitude toward our industry. You talk to a lot of oldsters like us, and we can get down on the business. We can complain about this isn't
Of
working, and
course.
too much of this and not enough of that. The creative
Of
isn't as
course.
good.
I know.
What you've
And
heard
that's
that.
okay.
What do you make of all that?
Listen, I think I need to learn it for myself. I think I have had nothing but an incredible experience thus far in my college career. I think my internships were my first introduction into what the real world is and what it entails. However, it doesn't make me any less excited for it. I think I'm a very flexible, adaptable human. I've proved that I think over and over again in my life. I am the kind of person who I live by the motto of like, do it scared, just do it. I'm gonna figure it out no matter what it is, right? Like no matter what challenges get thrown at me, I will absolutely figure it out. And I've been living by that. And so when I hear, people talking about the industry, right? And I actually just went, it was like a CEOs, all like the Minneapolis CEOs. They were sitting in front of us and they were all together. It was incredible. Like a united front sitting together, talking about their business. And, one of the big things they were talking about, right, was just what's the next 5 years? What's the agency life? What is this going to look like? The AI conversation is huge right now. And there's so many different ethical conversations going on. And I think as, intimidating as it can be, especially as a young person trying to pursue what this is with how competitive it is and how much it's changing, I'm just going to remain flexible to it. And I'm excited. I think that excitement will not dissipate either. It will not go away anytime soon. Maybe until I'm older, right? And I have more experience in the professional world. But as of right now, I'm remaining flexible, I'm remaining adaptable, and I'm just excited for it. I've only ever worked on things that I love, and I think you guys can tell I'm a pretty passionate human. So as
A
long as
little
I love
bit.
what I'm doing and I love the work that I'm doing, I think I'll always find the positive in it, always.
Do you use AI?
Yes.
How do you
Not all
use
the
it?
time. I use it as a thought generator. That's kind of what actually the Hubbard School, they really encourage it as brainstorming sessions, thought starters, thought, generators. However, I do not use it verbatim, right? Like I'll use it in my portfolio class. We'd use it for I don't know. Here's a good example. I was working, I don't know if you guys know this brand, it's called Jellycat. And it's very popular amongst Gen Z. It's like the stuffed animal brand. And it's just these adorable stuffed animals with faces on them. And for whatever reason, social media, like Gen Zers are eating these stuffed animals up, including myself. They're quite adorable. Like New York has a giant like pop-up with these Jellycat stuffed animals. They make them in like food shapes. So like they have a Jellycat kitchen in New York where you can go and you can get like your hamburger Jellycat. It's just like a little stuffy with the face. And we had to like that was very long-winded, but the Jellycat brand is awesome. Resonates a lot with Gen Z. That was one of our clients in my portfolio class, one of our, quote unquote, like fake clients. And we used AI to, generate brainstorming sessions and thought starters. And we ended up landing on it was some random thing that AI shot out at us. And it was like a Jellycat therapist. Like, why don't you talk about how Jellycat can be this like really cuddly, adorable stuffed animal, can be like this fun thing and this fun campaign for Gen Zers to see and on billboards, out of home, social media, where it's like a Jellycat therapist. So it doesn't replace an actual therapist, but it's like a temporary solution to a problem that you have, right? Like you just went through a breakup, your Jellycat's there for you. Like talk to your Jellycat. And from that idea that we saw on AI, that we got from ChatGPT. We then came up with our own creative execution. So I came up with the idea of like a Jellycat hotline number. So like I got it from it was like this kindergarten class, and these little kids like made this phone number and said if you're having a bad day, call this phone number. And it's like all these little kindergartners saying, "Have a great day. I hope that you're doing better." So that was my inspiration. I thought of like therapists and I thought of like these fun creative executions, and I ended up coming with like a Jellycat hotline. And I would have never thought of that if we didn't have that like just general thought starter and that like therapy idea that AI just kind of shot out at us. And we used it. And it ended up being so fun and incredibly successful. So yeah, I loved it.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, I love using ChatGPT as well. I don't use it for idea generation. I use it, as a research assistant,
Absolutely.
as a summary tool to
Absolutely.
search for
Oh, summary tool for
patterns.
sure. Yeah, 1000%.
Yeah, to look for patterns that I might probably see on my own, but it just
Yeah.
does it so much quicker.
Oh yeah.
It is getting huge is generating huge controversy in our
It
industry,
is.
as I'm sure you know. And in fact, a company reached out to me just recently that it claims that it can do good briefs, write briefs, and do good creative in
Oh,
minutes, not weeks.
Sure.
Well, Henry and I
Sure.
are going to
likely
talk. Henry, I'm
story.
not going to tell you who it is. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet because the founder has volunteered. He reached out to me
Oh,
and
wow.
he wants to come on our show. He's a big fan of our show. So I want to put the metal, what do you call it? Put the pedal to the metal. And
Pedal to the metal, yeah.
yeah, and he's offered us the chance to test the tool. So in
That's
any event, I mean,
so interesting.
it's just a part of our lives now, and we have to
It
figure
is.
out
You got to
how
learn to
much can we,
adapt.
how do we make it useful to us? How do we not let it take
Absolutely.
over our our thinking,
Absolutely.
or become over reliant on it, I guess is the more appropriate way to say it.
Yeah,
In
that's a great way to say it.
in your 5 minutes in the business so far, through your
Yeah,
internships,
literally.
what sense do you get that the colleagues that you ran into and met in your internships are using AI? Are they?
I don't, I don't fully remember that being a conversation but I also never asked. Um, I I did hear some whispers of copywriters using it to their advantage, right? Like again, but not to use it as a final product, but to use it as a thought starter, right? Like,
Mhm.
what are we working with? How are we working with it? And so, copywriter specifically, I was hearing whispers about it. I think when I was adult in agency, AI wasn't huge yet. However, when I moved to GSMP last summer, it was obviously much, much bigger. So, yeah, I think I heard about it briefly with copywriters for brainstorming sessions or thought starters. But that was about it. Other than that, I didn't hear much about
Okay.
AI in the office, to be totally honest with you.
What advice would you give to freshmen who would
Oh
be
man.
like showing up in
Yeah.
class, not knowing exactly what it is they wanted to
Yeah.
do? What advice would you give them if they came up to you and said, I think I'm a little creative, or I think I like, something about advertising is kind of interesting, but I don't know what to do. What kind of advice would you give them?
That's a great question. Honestly, I would ask them, first of all, if they'd even be interested in something like this, right? Like in the Hubbard School, you have so many different options. It's not even just advertising and PR and Matt, like you can go into, producing and radio and journalism. And it's such a beautifully diverse school. I can advocate for the Hubbard School of Journalism for the rest of my life. I would say, I'd ask specifically like what their interests are, what their passions are, right? Like if journalism is where they're like, I love writing, like that's where my creativity lies. It's my brain, like that creative part of my brain, like that's what I love. I'd absolutely say, look at journalism, look at what that is. They're like, I want to be a talk show radio host. I know the major for you, and it's in the Hubbard School of Journalism, right? I think I'd want to know more about just their passion, like what drives them and what that is, if it's graphic design, right? Or if, they want to go into advertising, but they have the graphic design mind, like you should probably pursue advertising, be a creative, like such an amazing opportunity. PR, if you're a fantastic writer, if you love crisis communication and the excitement of what that is. I know it's not always crisis, thank God, but what if that is your niche and that's what you really enjoy? I would just say follow that passion and that drive and don't give up on it. I think again, like I was mentioning before, being a singer and a performer, I didn't want to lose that part of myself. So I made sure that whatever I was going into, I could still pursue those things in my own way, right? So my give and take with that is being a presenter on NSAC. I love pitching. I love creating the script and getting to see the campaign as a whole and put a story together and be a storyteller and do it in my own theatrical way, right? With my hands. So I don't know. I love it. I would just say whatever drives you and whatever your passion is, like we've got the place for you. We just gotta get you in the right direction for sure.
Alex Chrislu, I would say that you have all the necessary ingredients. You have great passion, you're articulate,
Appreciate that.
you
Thank
like
you.
to think strategically.
Yeah.
You don't take no for an answer. You have energy. You have all the things this industry needs. So,
I
uh,
appreciate that.
we look forward to coming back to you maybe in a year or two to see where you are. how
I'd love
your
that.
career is progressing, which is something we are, that's our plan with our
I would love
emerging
that.
talent series.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining Henry and me on the Brief Brothers. This has been
Thank you
wonderful.
for having me. This has been such an enlightening conversation. It's such a pleasure. Such a pleasure to finally meet you both.
Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
And he's Howard Eibach. Together, we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye
Ah.
bye.